So I guess we'll start very briefly, try and keep it to a few minutes, unless you've got some great, colorful stories. But just tell us a bit about your transformation, what you're dealing with, and what you're trying to achieve. Maybe I'll start with you, Simon. John.
Thanks, Ross. So, as I introduced, John Parr from Siemens Digital Grid. I look after the delivery teams around the world that are enabling our business to grow into the digitized transformation market for energy. And we began a journey with MuleSoft about 12 months ago. And to echo some of the conversation already, for us, it's all about speed, enablement, and the agility that delivers new applications quicker and faster. And that's really what we're all about.
Fantastic. Simon?
Dixon's Carphone, some of you won't know if you're from Europe or the UK. You'll know we're a merger of a big consumer electronics retailer, Dixon's, and a mobile phone seller, Carphone. The equivalent in the US would be Best Buy Mobile. And actually, part of the journey that we've been on is not only disrupting our business and thinking about how we change all of our journeys, but then using the skills that we've got and the IP that we've got to help other people. So actually, Best Buy Mobile was done by us, and we're currently opening several hundred stores with Sprint to take our knowledge and all the transformation that we've been through and help other people go through it.
So I had the opportunity to speak to you guys earlier. I am part of the IT side of digital. So for us, continuing off where I left off earlier, it's all about customer. When we talk about customer, it's about contextual communication with the customer. Not communicating for the sake of communicating, but knowing what to do, when to do this, and how to do it. And then we put the customer front and center for everything that we talk about on the digital space and making it relevant for the customer. So that's pretty much the gist of what we're trying to focus on.
That's great, thank you. And so, John, Siemens aren't known for software, they're known for big and small package, engines and trains and things. What does this mean for you to drive change in that business? And what are you actually doing to drive that change?
So you're quite right. Siemens is kind of known to be a big engineering company, trains, wind farms, power stations, kind of the big stuff that's out there. But what has become a reality over the last few years is that within that marketplace, we generate huge amounts of data. And the part of the business I work for is a data-only business. We're quite unique in Siemens in we don't actually make anything physical. We manage, handle, and aggregate data for energy companies. And because of that, Digital Grid was formed within Siemens to use the best amount of intelligence that we have and the best services that we have to enable that data. And one of the reasons we partnered with MuleSoft was to choose the ability to extend all of that data to our partners, our customers, and all our regional companies through easy-to-reach APIs and application networks. And that's kind of what our journey is. We're about 12 months in, and I have to say it's been an exciting journey for Siemens, and it's opening some really interesting opportunities around the world for us.
Fantastic. So, Simon, you mentioned you're actually disrupting sort of the retail acquisition of technology. I mean, maybe explain that in a bit more detail. What does that mean, and what are you doing to drive that change for Dixon's Carphone?
So fundamentally, selling a mobile phone sounds like an easy thing, but actually it's quite a complex process. There's a lot of to and froing at a technology level between us and the carrier to do fraud checks, credit checks. And actually, fundamentally, most people view their mobile phone salesperson like a used car salesperson, or even worse, a realtor, I think, as you'd call them over here. It's a estate agent in the UK, pretty low form of life, and always trying to sell you the stuff that you don't want because they're on high commission. So the journey that we've been going through is putting a digital tablet in the store, which is real-time connected to all the things we need to connect to, networks, that's where our friends at MuleSoft come in. And actually trying to get the best of both worlds, which is, it's a complex sell. How many megapixels has an iPhone 6 got versus a Samsung Edge 7, whatever it is? How do you take all of that complexity, present it to the customer in a way where the customer feels the machine is helping them choose what they want, but the human is helping them through that journey? Just to give you an idea, in the UK there are 350,000 permutations and combinations of mobile phones, tariffs, data. No human being can actually remember that, and customers don't believe that a human being can. So a lot of our journey has been, how do you get the best of the human interaction? So we don't train our salespeople on technical stuff anymore. We train them on how you sell and how you interact. And they get all the technical stuff from the platform, and the customer believes that they get the right recommendation because actually it's the computer that takes all of the variables that we ask the customer about and then gives them an answer. we actually slow it down. We let it think for about 2 seconds, because actually it would do it like that, but you want the customer to feel it actually had to think about it quite hard. It's got all those 350,000 permutations and combinations to work through, and it's worked really well. Our NPS has gone up about 20%, our conversion's gone up about 36%, and our colleagues, and we don't just think of customer, we think of our colleagues, because actually you've got to put your colleagues at the heart, because they're your interface with the customer, and if they're not very good, or they're not very empowered, then you haven't got much of an interface to the customer. So it's all about trying to bring the best of those two worlds together, and we're now doing it with other people. So we've taken this as a software platform, and it's now rolling out with one of the big US networks and another big global OEM who I'm not allowed to mention, but live not far down the coast from here.
Oh, I know. I won't mention it, though. So it sounds like what you've really managed to do, which is, I think, the art of this change, is take technology and merge it with people, right? I think it's the hardest sort of in knocking of heads, if you like, that we sort of resist technology if it doesn't do exactly what we think it wanted to do. And what you're really working on is smoothing that path so that you can help customers make the right decision, but allow people to also be part of that engagement so you can drive the most value.
Yep.
So for me, that's a bit similar to McDonald's, right? I mean, Absolutely. You're not too dissimilar from figuring out how technology works with your massive, massive consumer base. So tell us a bit more about some of the early things that you've done today.
So, it's a similar story. If you talk to our friends in the digital, the business side of digital, the key word they're going to use is frictionless. Everything needs to be frictionless. Obviously, if I had the liberty to wait for a few seconds, that'd be great. But for us, our customers need things now, and they need it wherever they are and whatever customer journey they're on. For us, there's a saying in McDonald's, if it's not in the restaurant, it's not real. But with digital, for us, what we're saying is if it's not in the market, it's not real. So our goal has been to build systems that scale up, handle the volume, handle the scale, and we are able to deploy it. When we talk about digital, everybody talks about IQ and EQ. Well, CQ is equally important, the commercial viability, the TCO. When we talk about solutions, your solutions have to be viable to be able to be deployed, and they should scale. I just want to share, when we started the journey with Mule, we know where we are, but we also know where we're going to go. So we tested the system, just the US instance. We were able to crunch about 45 million transactions within a 24-hour period. That's the scale that we're talking about. And these, organizations prepare for a Black Friday. We deal with it on a day-to-day basis, and we deal with it 3 times a day: lunch, breakfast, and dinner.
So Black Friday 3 times a day.
That's pretty much it, right?
Awesome.
So I think that's, for us, it's not about the experience. That's equally important, but it has to work.
Yeah.
And that's the key.
Fantastic. That's great. And I guess this question for all of you really is, what sparked the urgency here? Because what you're talking about isn't really just changing one aspect. You're not actually talking about driving one single initiative. But you're changing the face of the business in a lot of ways. You're embarking on this new change. I'd love to go quickly, we'll just go sequentially, but what's been the driver for change for you, and where's the urgency coming from?
So we're primarily a B2B and sometimes a B2B and C business. And the biggest change for us and the driver of our transformation over the last 12 months has really been that the C in our B2B business has become, as everyone knows, more aware, more astute, more demanding, and more information hungry. And because we're the root source of that information to our business partners, we have to be our business partners' C relationship. So we've had to move from simply being a supplier in the supply chain, even if it's a power station or a wind farm of several hundred turbines. We've had to move one stage further to our customer to become actually the customer's relationship. And to do that, we've had to change. We've had to transform. And the digital service, as we deliver it, is information. So from the simplest one, where 12 months ago we began a new service in Europe where customers can prepay for energy, rather than using a traditional method of going to a local outlet, paying cash or card over the counter through a service, and then receiving a token they take back, etc. We delivered an online digital service that went live 12 months ago. Today, that service transacts £250,000 worth of business every day. Now, that's a fraction of the traditional business, which transacts in excess of £3 billion a year. But from 12 months ago when it was not available and the customers had no smartphone app, They had no web access to the services, to today, where we transact a vast amount of money. Now, that's just one example of where we see transformation being driven into our business. And if we hadn't had a connectivity platform that would allow us to grow that quickly and enable it and roll it out as fast as we have, we couldn't have responded to that market, and we wouldn't have been in that place. So we were first to market because of the MuleSoft platform. We were first to market with a prepayment online app, and it's delivered great value to the consumers that have it. And the nice thing is that the consumers actually see us behind the energy retailer as being part of that service.
Fantastic. What about you, Simon?
Yeah, I think we've sort of got two bits of the business. As I said, we've got the consumer electronics, the Best Buy, Media Saturn equivalent, and then the Carphone warehouse bit, and they suffer different dynamics. So Dixon's was suffering from the attack of Amazon in the UK, who were obviously price discounting, have tax advantages and no physical property, so quite difficult. And for those of you in the UK, you'll know our main competitor went bust from a mobile phone perspective about 18 months, and Carphone is a middleman. We sell phones for networks and for the OEMs, and our networks are both our greatest friends and also many times our greatest enemies. So basically they don't want us in the market. They'd rather we weren't there because we create churn and customer choice and things that the networks fundamentally don't really like. So that meant basically we were being attacked on all sides. So what we've had to do is learn to innovate continuously. That's from our business model, as I said, not just selling our own mobile phones, but wandering around the world, helping other retailers sell mobile phones, but also just stuff like iterating our store journey. So, you know, we need to attract in customers and then keep those customers, because customers often think that once they've signed up to a carrier or a network, that they've then become the customer of that carrier, and we still need them to come back into the store. So it was all about just survival, basically, and as a result of that, we've become relatively entrepreneurial and innovative. And in order to do that, we're trying to get to a world where, with my CIO hat on, actually the business doesn't need to talk to me anymore. So we've got a platform that we call Honeybee Create, which if you want to hear about it, come along at 1:30 to one of the breakouts, where to change our customer journeys, I can actually give a tool, which is a tool that we've built that sits around Ross's MuleSoft product. That means my chief exec can change the customer journey. He doesn't need to talk to me. He can get online. We don't let him do it, by the way, because as you imagine your chief exec changing your customer journey, that's quite a scary thought. He doesn't understand.
That's the
things like
self-serve
change
value of the network. You see, you enable everyone, even your CEO, to go and change things, which is an interesting prospect, but there we are.
So he can change it right the way through, and within an hour, it's provisioned everything that we need on Amazon or whichever cloud provider you want, including all the operations management and everything. So we're just trying to innovate to the point where you don't have to talk to IT, because we are generally the bottleneck. Not always, but generally, and we're certainly always the kicking boy or kicking girl. And at a personal level, I'm so bored of that, I just don't want to be in the way anymore. So it's all about giving the power back to the business, and we're very, very close to basically not having to be in certain styles of conversation anyhow, particularly around customer journeys. And I think the other thing, everyone is fully aware of Google Analytics and what you can do on your website and understand where customers fall out and all of that stuff. For most retailers, you probably know the customer walked in the door because you've probably got a heat sensor, or you may, if you're advanced, have a tracker, and if you're really big, you may have proximity sensors and so on. But actually, you don't really know an awful lot about the actual journey they're going through in your retail environment. Because we've got a tablet-based sales journey, we track 900 data points across that journey. We can do stuff that Google Analytics can't do in terms of understanding the in-store journey, and we can relate that to NPS, to conversion, to average basket size. So we can real-time change our customer journeys. We see a store colleague who does a great new journey that enhances NPS. We can immediately push that to get everyone else to operate that way. It is a completely different way of running a retail environment. And I think if we hadn't done it, we may have gone the way the elephants are going in Africa, sadly, at the moment.
See, dog's the asteroid then. Excellent. And Mukesh, I mean, you told us a little bit about where you started, but where's the urgency coming from in the business for McDonald's? Why change now?
Simple. Stay relevant. Right? We have to be relevant. The market dynamics are changing, and we need to have platforms that give us the ability to innovate and innovate fast. So we're in this constant, build, measure, learn cycle where we try things, we tweak it, and off we go. But the other thing is, once we've tried and tested it, we want to maximize reuse, and that's where Mule's power kicks in. We were talking about federating our APIs. We were talking about making them externally accessible to third parties. And that's where I believe we will be able to get our word out, bring in, talk about platforms that never existed. Bots would be a great example, right? There's a big explosion about how the industry is looking at bots. Maybe that's something that we should be looking at. I also look at some simpler digital channels like the kiosk. It is changing our operating model. Now, when we talk about a front counter sale, you're standing at the front counter. Now, when we talk about a kiosk, what do we do after the person orders at the kiosk? Now, we got to talk about table service. How's digital going to enable that? How are we going to make sure that the customer is able to give us feedback and real-time feedback? So it's not only disrupting our normal operations, it's adding additional capabilities that never existed in our ecosystem. And for us, that is where the power of Mule comes in. That's where we want to leverage our APIs to start exploding out the capabilities that go beyond the transactional element to the experience element.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great. I mean, and it's interesting because you're all on different journeys. You have different sort of drivers, but the constant does seem to be the same, which is there's a point where there's so much pressure externally and probably internally to change that you're starting to think differently about the services you bring to market, the way in which you engage consumers, and of course all the pipe dreams of where you can take it next only really works if you have a level of agility in your organization, and as Simon says, IT can get out of the way and allow the business to self-serve as much as possible. That's fantastic. So actually, Simon, I'd love to know a bit more about anything you can say about what's next for you, because you're on this almost rampage now. You've sort of solved this interesting retail customer journey. You're selling it globally. How do you think about taking the platform forward?
I don't know. It's quite interesting. We're a sort of software startup sitting inside a major FTSE 100 or a Fortune 200, I guess, equivalent company in the UK. And it's been quite challenging because retailers, for those of you from retailers, we are very, very cheap when it comes to spending money on IT. So we don't like spending anything, and particularly on IT. And what we've been able to do is, with a couple of very landmark clients, develop this platform. And we are now off wandering around the world selling it to people. And it's a really interesting journey because actually whenever I go and talk to people, we're not actually generally talking to the IT community. We're talking to the CEO, the CMO, the COO, the head of retail, because actually what we're trying to do is transform the customer interaction in retail. We don't generally talk about online because there are too many other players in that space, and it's a fairly well-trodden path, although we'll integrate to anyone's website as they wish. But it is just a very interesting, from a personal perspective. I've been a CIO now for too many years to remember, and now having to do what you've done over the last 10 years has been a very interesting change, and great to be reinvigorated and have something exciting to do. What is really quite amusing, though, is when we go in and talk to a CEO, we've got a very compelling story and it works quite well. The interesting challenge is we get pushed from the CEO or the CMO to the equivalent of me, the CIO, and we immediately hit a resistance factor. Partly because they don't believe that we can do what we can do because we've got this great toolkit built around Mule, and partly probably are not invented here, and I'm not having a go because I would probably have exactly the same reaction when I put my CIO hat on. And it's been really instructive to work out how do we sell this change message to people? How will we go in and help them change the way their stores work? Because if you live in anywhere like consumer electronics, you're always being told how much better Amazon is, how much better price competition they are. You're always being told, why don't you just deploy your website into the store? That's really easy, isn't it? Let's just go and take Hybris and plug it into the store. Actually, it isn't, because customers don't want to shop in a website way in a store. They want to have an actual interaction which is relevant to a physical environment and with a human being next to them that knows what they're talking about. So taking all of that, trying to parcel it up, has been a really interesting journey. And we're only at the beginning, I hope,
Excellent.
at the moment.
So, John, I mean, you've started down this journey, you've been doing for about a year. What are some of the early sort of insights you have to the projects you delivered or the way the operating model has changed within your organization, within Siemens?
So it's quite interesting, and I resonate with some of those stories, although we're in a different space in terms of commercial consumer, whereas in Siemens it's very much business to business with the C on the end. A lot of the internal business that we're doing with Siemens to enable regional companies to be part of the digital transformation, we faced a similar resistance. How can you possibly do that? How can we possibly embrace this technology in a timescale that's less than years? So one of the things we've had to do is we've had to pilot various exercises, if we can call it a pilot, where in certain countries we've either delivered locally a new service and a series of services, or we've rolled it to a region that hasn't got the capability. Excuse me. So in the UK, for example, we delivered a new management service for the field team where we've got about 250, 300 field engineers who basically were still working on very antiquated 7 to 10-year-old equipment. There was no direction on where they were going. There was no tracking on how they were doing. And the job work that they had was very non-interactive with the end client. And we put a new process in place that meant within 9 months they had a whole new field force system rolled out to the first quarter of that business. That took us about 9 months. Now, because we built it on Mule with API reuse and connectivity, the second part of that journey will take us about 5 months. And then we hope the third part of that journey will take us about 3 months. Now, as soon as we delivered the first part of that journey, my respective management in Germany took one look at it and were quite honestly flabbergasted. They didn't believe it was possible, that we would do it again more quickly. So we've proven we can do it, but now we've got to prove we can do it more quickly, which they're watching very, very interestedly. But in parallel to that, kind of without telling them, what we did was we enabled our regional company in South Africa with an existing process, a business management process that we have in a European cloud through another provider, but it's connected through the Mule APIs. And we actually enabled a service of BP process management into the South African business without any local capability, without any local trained individuals or competency, but basically some users. So we gave the users 2 days training. We built the process for them in 4 weeks. We enabled it within 24 hours. So basically, they had a full BPM process up and running in less than 6 weeks. And for most people that have been involved in BPM processes, that's a long journey, usually a year plus to get the first one off the ground. But because we had that as an existing capability in the UK, we enabled it remotely. So we've kind of gone 2 ways. We've demonstrated that A, you can make progress very quickly on something that's new, but B, you can enable a legacy system to provide an even quicker process, even on a remote basis. So for us, that's really where sort of both sides of the Mule journey have benefited our business.
Fantastic, excellent. That's great. I'll quote you on that later. The king of go big or go home over the end there. You know, you talk about scale in a way most people don't think about scale. So I'd love to learn a bit more about, you know, where you are and where you're going, and you know, the numbers you throw out are kind of mind-boggling, but help them understand how big this transformation effort is, the scale of it.
There are obviously certain things that I cannot share.
Oh, yeah, tell what you can, of course.
Just talking about the scale, right? I think our primary focus is deployment. Get to the markets, get markets up and running on the stack. And you know, with the successes that we've seen with our US installation, you know, in the past it took us weeks, if not months, to set up environments. And with Mule, we can provision an environment anywhere in the globe within 24 hours. That's a big deal for us. And when you think about that scale, that gives me the ability to roll out environments, roll out platforms at a much faster pace, and also gives comfort to our business partners that, you know, we are building platforms that are at par with what the rest of the industry is doing. Apart from that, I also believe that we're at the tipping point from a growth perspective. And with Mule, what I believe we've seen is, you know, in the past, the effort that went into creating that integration hairball was mammoth. And we've simplified that. And we've promoted reuse. We've given the business partners the ability to deploy solutions at a much faster pace. Obviously, I don't have numbers to prove it, but you know, this is the platform that we know is going to be foundational and key to our success. And you know, that is one of the reasons why when we started, I remember talking to Simon when we started the journey with Mule. We were not looking for a software provider or a vendor. We were looking for a partnership. And we sat across the table and said, we're in this together. And that's where I'm proud to say that we've been very successful. We've been very successful with the partnership, and we've been very successful as an organization too. There have been instances where you've stepped up and helped us push things along. And we will do things different from the others. And you've already seen that. With McDonald's, nothing is out of the box. And that's not because we want it. That's how our businesses are organized. That's how our systems are. And what we've seen is we have invested in a platform that actually gives us that liberty, gives us that flexibility. And that's key. That's key to us.
Fantastic, excellent. So we got time for probably one more question, and I think for the folks in the room that are going or actually about to embark in this change, I'd love to get at maybe one or two anecdotes or just things that you've learned along the way that you kind of wish you knew, at a conference like this a year ago. So actually, I'll go to you, John, and any sort of parting words of advice as you start this, as other people in the room start this journey.
I think Siemens being a very traditional engineering business, we have a certain way of dealing with vendors and suppliers, and I pick up on the comment that was made, it's very important to actually not view it like that and view it as a true partnership. And we were kind of slow to embrace the success journey that Mule brings, but when we did, that absolutely launched our process and our progress. And we probably not lost, but we kind of dawdled for the first few weeks in terms of the engagement properly. And we didn't really get a hold of what was going on, and we were a bit kind of taken aback by some of the brave phone calls and the challenge me approach that was given to us. But I can honestly say that once you do get involved in that and you embrace that, and you get the customer success team involved and you get the Fast Start program delivered, it really does make a big difference. And going from a standstill, I basically say about 12 months ago, to where we are now, we've created our own reuse library. We've probably built somewhere in the region of a dozen APIs into our legacy systems, plus some of the ones we've got from the library stack to connect to. I don't think we really appreciated how much of the journey we could get done in the first 12 months. And I really do recommend that if you're about to embark on that journey, you run at it as fast as you can and get the Mule guys to support you, because it's a very valuable part of the partnership.
Great. How about you, Simon?
I don't know, because we'd been through, with somebody I'm not allowed to mention on this stage, an earlier generation of service-oriented architecture, and it was, we didn't tell the business we were doing it because it's quite difficult to explain to the business. I think the most important things in all of these things is just choose your partners very carefully. We have a big relationship with Accenture, and we have a big relationship, obviously, with Mule. You were talking about transaction volumes. When we first started on this journey, to activate a single adder line to one US carrier is 30 API calls. We are trying to do that across 20 countries, which all have between 3 and 5 carriers in them. So we are trying to do a systems integration problem from hell. And by the way, the carriers change those about once a month. We currently have a partner who wants us to do 100,000 API calls a second, because funnily enough, for 2 hours a year, they push an enormous part of their annual volume. So we had to choose our partners very carefully, because some of those are quite intractable technology problems to solve, and we had to innovate a lot, because there was no one piece of technology that would allow us to solve that problem, which is why we started with Mule, and we built a bunch of stuff around it. I don't believe anyone out there can solve this on their own, and we're not either arrogant enough or stupid enough to believe that we could. So the journey for us was choose our partners well, think hard about who they should be, but then also go for the chemistry, go for the people that have a similar ambition to you, because if the chemistry doesn't work when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, you need people who are going to be there to work with you to solve it, because this stuff is very hard, particularly when you're going to try and give it to your chief executive and you have to think about all the things he could do to destroy it that you never thought of because you think about it logically and he doesn't.
Little dig there.
I hope he's not watching any videos. Otherwise my career will be even shorter lived.
This is all private, just don't look over there, there's a big screen. How about you, Mukesh? Any parting words on your journey to date and any advice to give to the folks in the room?
I was here last year, so that is when we were starting our journey, and I was sitting in the audience and like, you know what, we think it's the right platform, we think it's the right partnership, but we also set an aggressive timeline. We said we want to do this fast, and what we realized, and we've proved it, that we can do it fast. But one of the biggest challenges for me at that point in time was, will I find the right skill sets for somebody to start coding on Mule, start developing on Mule? Because our scale's big, we need a big team. And I've been pleasantly surprised at the ease at which the tool with which our developers have been able to get onboarded on this. And they've been productive relatively fast compared to, I've done this for a long time, and I was really surprised at how quickly our developers were able to pick up the tool and be productive. And I think that, for me, was, when we migrated from one of your competitors to Mule, that was an aha moment for me right there. It's like, you know what? We've always wanted to go fast. Now we can. We've got a car. We've got a fast engine. Now it's about hitting the accelerator and hitting the go button, right? So I think for me, at that point in time, I think, second-guessing myself as to, the tool's great, but can I go fast? And I'm glad to be proven wrong.
Fantastic. All right, I think those are great insights. I hope that gave you a good idea of what this change in organizations actually looks like across 3 quite different industries. So please join me in thanking our panelists here, John, Simon, and Mukesh. Thank you.